All right, well, let's move on to one other giant story in the news today. And luckily, we have an excellent guest to help us break this story down. Joining us now is Mark Dimonstein, president of the American Postal Workers Union. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to come speak with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure.
So I wanted to start off with, just helping the audience understand the basics of the post office, which is in fact a government agency, but is certainly talked about and treated differently from other government agencies. So, let's start with the basic question of how the post office is funded, because there's a lot of talk about the profitability of the post office when we don't hear that in regard to other government agencies.
So before 1970, the Postal Service was funded like any other government agency through tax dollars. And in 1970, there was a historic, unlawful, and victorious nationwide postal strike. And one of the products of that strike is the post office was reorganized from the old post office department to the new United States Postal Service. And there was a transition of about 12 years where there were going to be no tax dollars used to fund the operations of the Postal Service. So since 1982, and this is something that most people don't realize, if we were to go out in the street and take a poll, probably 98 out of 100 people would say, yes, it's funded with tax dollars. It's funded by the sale of postage and postal services, and that has to be enough, and traditionally it has been. We're in a unique situation now, I'm sure we'll talk about, but it has been enough for the Postal Service to carry out its mission of universal services to all of us, no matter who we are, where we live, at one uniform and reasonable rate. And so it's a quasi-independent government agency. Postal workers are actually federal workers, but we work in an independent way. And so that's what has since 1970, and the separation was 1982, where there's no tax dollars that goes into the Postal Service.
And so, is the goal of the post office to turn a profit? Is that its mandate?
No, its mandate is to serve the people of the country on a break-even basis, and again have enough revenue to be able to do that. But it's not there to pack money in the bank, to enrich shareholders or high-priced CEOs. It's here to enrich the people of the country, and along the way, because they're unionized jobs, the very important aspect of family-sustaining union jobs. There are over 600,000 people that work for the United States Postal Service. So, and those good jobs not only help ourselves as workers and our families, but it builds healthier communities and a healthier country in a general sense, because the better workers are paid, the healthier we all are, physically, mentally, and the stronger our communities are.
And the post office is so incredibly important, especially to rural communities who otherwise wouldn't have access to deliveries from private companies like UPS and FedEx. And if I remember correctly, these private companies rely pretty heavily on the post office to deliver to major metropolitan areas of the country. And they will deliver to major metropolitan areas of the country and then rely on the post office to deliver the rest of the route to rural parts of the country. And so, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's true. And it underscores that how important it is to have something that belongs to all of us. And it's a small d democratic right. And really a lot of the broad stroke of what's happening in the struggle around the post office today is really the question of privatization in general. And that is whether the public services, the public money, something that belongs to all of us, is going to be dismantled, privatized, and turned over to those who use those public services to make a quick dollar. And what happens in those situations, and it would happen to the Postal Service if privatization were to take place, services go down, workers' wages and benefits go down, and rights and prices go up. But the point you touched on is actually underscores that if it's a private company, they're not going to go everywhere. So the post office handles millions of packages a week from United Parcel Service because they can't make money going. And it's not just rural America, although it's mainly that. Anywhere that they can't make money, where they don't think they have the so-called density to make money, they will turn over to the Postal Service and then rely on that national infrastructure that belongs to the people to carry out that work. So it does underscore that if this ever became a operation that was based on whether somebody can make money, then the people are going to really lose out, and a few companies will be enriched.
Yeah,
Now,
and that's yeah. Go ahead.
I just had
Go
a quick follow-up to that because, I understand the importance of the post office. I think most Americans do enjoy the services of the post office and also understand the importance. And so the post office needed help and needs help during this pandemic. And when there was an effort to help provide some financial relief to the post office, the Trump administration made it clear that he would veto any type of legislation that would include post office funding. So what kind of threat is the post office under as a result of the Trump administration refusing to fund it through stimulus money?
Well, that's a very important question. So, look, there are some long-run challenges, some long-run issues that have created some of the financial problems with the Postal Service. Most of it goes back to 2006, where the Postal Service was forced by Congress, who manufactured a financial crisis for the Postal Service to pre-fund retiree health care benefits 75 years into the future. That's for workers that weren't working at the post office yet. In some cases, they weren't even born yet. And no other company and no other agency had to do that. So that's some of the background. But what happened in the pandemic has become an emergency. We all know the economic impact of this pandemic has been terrible on the world's workers. It's been terrible on workers in this country, 40 million plus suddenly unemployed. It's having an impact on small business, even in some cases larger business. And so, but it's having an impact on the Postal Service. So what's happened is letter volume is way down because look, how much advertising mail was going on during this period. I'm a proud grandpa and I couldn't go to the store to get the birthday card for my 4-year-old granddaughter and fill it out and address it and put a stamp on it and mail it during this time. So letter volumes way down. Temporarily, packages have made up some of the difference, but all the projections say, coming from the Postal Service, not from the unions, is that in a moderate economic recovery, and that's the best I think anybody thinks is going to happen, the post office will lose $50 billion of revenue over the next 10 years just due to the impact of COVID. Now, tie that back to that there's no public tax dollars that funds the Postal Service, and they have to have enough revenue to carry out this wonderful mission. And so something's going to give. And without, in this one case, taxpayer appropriated emergency relief, the post office will likely run out of money early next year. Now, let's keep in mind that in the big stimulus package in March, that was the stimulus package that President Donald Trump said he's going to veto the stimulus package if it includes help for the United States Postal Service, real relief for the United States Postal Service. They took care of the corporations to the tune of over $500 billion, but there was not a dime for the public Postal Service. So we're at a fork in the road, and it is serious. Not only did Donald Trump and Secretary Treasurer Mnuchin say that we're going to stop this relief, but the friends in Congress who were promoting it also did not flip the script, and they kicked the can down the road. They didn't tell the Trump administration, well, guess what? There won't be a stimulus package without relief for the Postal Service. But there's a new opportunity. There's a lot of discussion now. There's an effort, certainly at the House of Representatives side, for $25 billion appropriated relief. It's interesting. It comes from a request of the Postal Board of Governors, which is a majority Republican Postal Board of Governors, and it's a unanimous request for real appropriated relief. So we are at a fork in the road, and the people of the country are speaking loud and clear that we support our Postal Service. We love our Postal Service. We trust it. 91% of the people of the country And I don't know anything in life that has that kind of approval rating.
True.
And can you talk about the new Postmaster General and give us some insight on some of the actions that he took once he took the job?
Yeah, we certainly voiced concerns even before they picked the new Postmaster General, that we need a Postmaster General who at least believes in the public ownership and the public mission. Obviously, there are going to be differences between the unions and management. We expect that. We're up for that. But we do want at least somebody that believes in this national treasure and wants to help build it, expand it, enhance it. So we put up some warning signals early. In fact, there was a nationwide petition with 400,000 signatures saying just that. We want a new PMG that's going to support and build the public postal service. And we were especially concerned because we do have an administration that's openly called for, first time in modern history anyway, openly called for the privatization of the Postal Service. They published it in a June 2018 Office of Management Budget Report. That's the White House itself. And they've laid it out very clearly. So obviously we were concerned about the direction of things. And we're concerned that that the agencies, the government agencies are being very politicized under this White House. And the Postal Service was set up in 1970 when it was reorganized to take out that political interference. So fast forward, our concerns were certainly came to life when Louis DeJoy, who was a mega donor of the Trump administration and of Trump himself, a finance chair of the Republican National Convention, ended up getting the nod to become the Postmaster General. He doesn't know much, if anything, about the inner workings. He certainly comes out of the private business and the non-union private businesses that he's used to just getting his way and doing anything that he wants to. And so he came in and very quickly, without any consultation with the unions, without any consultation with the workers, and without any consultation with the mailing community, just put in some changes within 30 days that has actually slowed down and delayed the mail. That's a problem for the people of the country. The unions vehemently oppose it. The workers, postal workers are, and I think most workers are, but since we're talking about postal workers, we're extremely dedicated to the mission. And if anybody doubted that, they can look no further than the pandemic. We're just like other essential workers, whether cashiers, truck drivers, transit workers, of course, our wonderful healthcare workers. We're out here in dangerous, difficult times, proudly still serving the public and binding the country together, which is our mission. So we are extremely dedicated. And anytime we have a top boss telling us to leave mail behind, runs counter to what we call it as our DNA, which is to treat the mail as our own and to never leave mail behind. So we're in tough times. The people are in tough times. And the underlying concern is that you can't privatize a public good like the United States Public Postal Service when 91% of the people support it. So you got to figure out how to break that bond. And the way you try to do it is you make it so it doesn't work anymore, much like what the rulers did with public education. You can defund it, you degrade it, and at some point people look elsewhere. And so we are concerned in the broader sense with anything that undermines the service. The good news is, and it's really good news, is that the people of this country, there's been an outpouring, an outcry in defense of the public postal service. And it's across the political spectrum, which we think is very important. That 91% figure, which came out of a Pew Research poll, it was essentially equal between those that said they're Republicans, Democrats, independents, Greens, Libertarians, and whatever. And so that's a real strength. And it's the same figure in rural America. It's the same figure in urban America. It's the same figure in suburban parts of the country. So it's really different than what's happening in Washington, where it's becoming the Postal Service is becoming a political football. which is unfortunate. For the people of the country, this is not a partisan issue. This is a unifying issue around a public good, public ownership, something that people trust and support. So that's the very good news, and the powers that be have had to blink some. But anyway, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. And, based on what you're saying, I was questioning the honesty of Louis DeJoy during his testimony before two different House committees just this past week. Didn't seem like he was being completely honest. And based on some of the details that you just gave us in your last answer, seems like he certainly wasn't being honest in the answer or the statement that he gave in the beginning of one of these hearings. So I want to play that video, and I'd love to get your reaction to what he's alleging here. Let's take a quick look.
First, I did not direct the removal of blue collection boxes or the removal of mail processing equipment. Second, I did not direct the cutback on hours at any of our post offices. And finally, I did not direct the elimination or any cutback in overtime. I did, however, suspend these practices to remove any misperceptions about our commitment to delivering the nation's election mail.
So what are your thoughts on what he said there? Because he's pretending as if some of these operational changes were implemented before he became the Postmaster General. Is there any accuracy to what he was saying there?
There's probably some. He came in on June 15th. I, as the president of the American Postal Workers, got a letter on June 17th about the removal of some of the sorting machines. I doubt that was done in a day or two, but it's all happening under his watch. And I think if you look at the whole package, there's no question that the policies he's implemented are his policies, and they're having the effect of slowing down the mail. And I think it's happening in two primary areas, although I think the whole thing has to be looked at as a package. And the taking out of the machines, look, I've been through the postal system for decades. Machines come, machines go. This is just really, at best, ill-timed to take out sorting machines when we've lost 30% of the letter volume to COVID, and we don't know what the future is going to bring. And we have an election, we have a census, we have another holiday season coming up. So at best, it's really ill-timed. But his direct policies that are having, in my view, the biggest impact is he has this view that every truck has to run on time. And he comes out of the trucking side, and maybe in the private sector, that's a good policy. It's a horrible policy for the post office, because what it means is if you got a truck, the trucks mainly go from sortation, processing, what we call processing plants, to the carrier units that are in your zip code or near your zip code that then take the mail out to you, your homes, to small businesses in the area, and the like. So what happens is if a truck's due out at 6 a.m., it may take another 6 minutes to get the mail from the processing machines to the dock, onto the trucks, and out there. There's also something called extra trips. So if a truck fills up, let's say there's extra volume, packages are high, packages take a lot more space. So maybe there's 4 or 5 postal containers that didn't fit on that truck that morning. They would send an extra trip, what's called an extra trip. Well, he canceled extra trips. And then he said that truck leaves at 6 a.m. So here's the story. So he did brag before Congress that their on-time trucking processes have risen to 97% on time. That's not the question. The question is whether your mail is on that truck, your mail that's due to be delivered that day. The promise to the American people, to the people of this country, under the law is prompt, reliable, and efficient services. And so what happens is the post office is a massive system. And I compare it to water running through a fire hose, and then somebody puts a garden hose at the end, and you watch how fast that backs up. And so mail is backing up. He also said, if you ask my reaction to the tape you just played, I think he contradicted himself. He said, on the one hand, I didn't do these policies. On the other hand, I suspended these policies. We have some of those policies in in writing that had been given in what's called stand-up talks to workers throughout the country. If those were not his policies, then he should have said, those are not my policies and those are not going to stand. So hours are down of the total hours that postal workers are working. And if the mail's still there and the workers aren't scheduled to work, then guess what? Mail's going to back up. But the fact is, but I think, again, the good news is, based on this outcry, is he did have to temporarily suspend some of these policies. He also made, at least in words, and words are only words. It's up to the rest of us, the people of the country, to make sure those words turn into action. But he gave some strong words about real priority to the mail-in ballots that, tens of millions of people are. That's the only access that we're going to have to the ballot box this year. So, the testimony wasn't all horrible. And if I can add one other thing, is when you talk about overtime hours and who's going to work the hours, the post office has been understaffed for years. We've been complaining about it. The other postal unions have raised the same thing. So when you're understaffed, overtime's high. And it is too high. We would rather more people be hired, more living wage jobs, and all that means for our families, our neighborhoods, our communities. But somehow that work has to get done. Now you add COVID on top of it. We've had 40,000 postal workers quarantined since March. That's 2 weeks at a time, at least. That's not everybody who was sickened. A lot of people were sickened, but that's part of the contact tracing, who's been exposed, who has to quarantine. Now, when you add that to being short-staffed, those hours have to be made up for as well. And I think the people of the country can accept some pockets of problems with the mail because of COVID, because there's a great appreciation for what postal workers are doing out here. What they cannot and should not accept is policy changes that are creating a systemic problem of slowing down the medicines to our veterans and our seniors, financial transactions, all of the exchange of ideas that's so important to so many of us, and back to those birthday cards too. And of course we have census, we have not just mail ballots, but voter information. There's so much, and e-commerce, and so much of the how much people have relied on that, even that much more during this challenging time of pandemic.
And you touched on DeJoy's words on the sorting machines and how it's going to impact the general election. Let's take a look at what DeJoy said about the machines in the House committee hearing.
Public, and I'm very
Will you
proud.
put the machines back?
I'm very proud to lead the organization. The rest of your accusations are actually
Will you put the high-speed
outrageous.
machines
No,
back?
I will not.
You will not.
Will not.
You will not. Well, there you go.
I just want to get your reaction to that. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, I think that I guess some of my reaction is, as much as we greatly appreciate support we have from both sides of the aisle many times, we can't allow this to become a bickering football. I think the machines are a problem. I don't think it's the main problem. And if any damage has been done, it should be reversed. And we're getting some anecdotal information. In some cases, they have at least left machines rather than trash machines. All we asked for when we got the letter back in June was, if you feel you have too many machines here or there because the letter volume is down, just unplug them, leave them. And then we have the flexibility for another day. And in most cases, they seem to have taken the machines out and thrown them out for scrap. And again, we don't think it's good policy. We think it's ill-timed. But I think the bigger problem is these policies around transportation of mail, canceling of extra trips, this insistence that everything has to run on time in this massive operation. And therefore, mail gets left behind if it's 2 minutes late. It is absurd. And we've always tried to make everything run on time. but the main thing was to get your mail to you. And so it's, I'm not going to get much more into the back and forth at the hearing. I would have rather that hearing. Well, the hearing was, it's fine to have the hearing. He certainly needs to be challenged. There's ethical concerns about his financial investments. There's concerns about how he got appointed. And so those are things that we'll have to hash out. I've been probably his most vocal critic, or at least among them. And I will continue to do so if his policies are affecting the service to the people of this country and undermining this wonderful national treasure. Goes back 245 years. And he thinks he can come in without knowing what the price of a postcard costs, that he can come in and make these changes within 30 days. That's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, Representative Katie Porter, asked him the most basic questions about the post office, and he was really struggling to answer. And I think you make a good point when you bring up the conflicts of interest in regard to his own financial investments in competitors to the post office. I do want to play just one more clip from the hearing because it focuses on the issue that's really been on the top of many Americans' minds, this upcoming general election and the important role that the post office will play for that election. So there was a fascinating moment during the hearings that I wanted to show the audience and then get a reaction from you. So let's take a quick look at that.
Do your mail delays fit Trump's campaign goal of hurting the post office, as stated in his tweets? Are your mail delays implicit campaign contributions?
These types of questions. I'm here to represent the Postal Service. It has nothing to do with, all my actions have to do with improvement into the Postal Service. Am I the only one in this room that understands that we have a $10 billion a year loss? Right? Am I the only one in this room that has looked at the OIG reports that have stacked up? Will you give this committee your communications with Mark Meadows, with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, with the President?
So, he denies that there's this intention of rigging the election. And as you mentioned, he did promise to halt all the operational changes that are happening at the post office until after the election. But let me just note, he also said that he will not reinstall the mail sorting machines, which are incredibly important when you have this influx of mail-in ballots. And the plan was to uninstall or to take out of service up to 671 of those sorting machines. By the time he committed to stopping or halting these operational changes, more than 600 of the sorting machines had already been taken out of service. And so I give you that context because, many people are curious, is this done intentionally to throw the election in Trump's direction? Clearly, there has been a concerted effort, not just by Republicans, but by Democrats as well, in some cases, to privatize the post office. I know that that's an intention. But do you think that Trump here is trying to kill two birds with one stone, essentially?
Well, I'm not the fly on the wall in their meetings, and I can't read the new Postmaster General's mind. I would say this, that President Donald Trump's railing against vote by mail, which is a two-pronged assault. One is that it's fraudulent, it's corrupt, and the other is that somehow the Postal Service doesn't have the capacity to handle tens of millions of more mail ballots in the system. And so the effort of the president is absolutely an effort at voter suppression, because on both of those fronts it's wrong. The Postal Service and postal workers have handled vote by mail for generations. For the military, for military personnel, it goes back to the Civil War. It's an ever more popular way of voting. 1 in 4 voters in 2016 voted by mail. 5 states vote by mail by law at every level of their election, from a school board to a president. It increases voter turnout, and it's virtually free of fraud. The state of Oregon has had vote by mail for 19 years, over 100 million ballots cast in that state over those 19 years. They've had 15 cases of voter fraud, less than 1 a year. The state of Utah, since 2013, a Republican-controlled state government. The states run elections and the counties do, not the Postal Service. 0 cases of voter fraud. So the idea that it's a fraudulent system, and is it in and of itself a fraudulent claim? And the idea that the post office cannot handle it, even with some of the problems we're facing, is also wrong. We do almost 500 million pieces of mail a day. During holiday season, sometimes it's just with letters and cards, it will exceed 3 billion in a week. We just did a national mailing from the CDC to every adult in every home. That mailing came from one place. Ballots come from hundreds and hundreds of different places. The idea of 10 million here and 10 million more there in the system for a postal worker is actually a piece of cake. Now, obviously, we're concerned about mail that's moving slower. But what I say to people is this: the system is secure, it's private, it's fraudulent free, it works. The Postal Service has great capacity. The states have to do it right. I mean, the state of Ohio, you can get an absentee ballot the Saturday before Election Day. Folks, that ain't going to work. I don't care what's going on. I don't care who the Postmaster General is. That's just not going to work. So our message to the voters, because it is a cherished, hard-fought, and right to vote that people take seriously, is to vote early, get the absentee ballot early, and vote early. And that's not too much to ask. Voting takes a little work. If you walk to a polling place, if you drive to a polling place, if you take a bus or a subway, you wait in line for two or 3 hours, that's a little bit of work. Getting your absentee ballot early and voting quickly is a piece of cake compared to that. And then there's a fallback position. If people feel they're tight on time, there's a lot of states have drop-off boxes. If I get the ballot on Saturday before Tuesday, I can fill it out, and in many states take it to a secure drop-off place. So I think that in terms of, I'm more focused, although I think words are just words, but I think the fact that DeJoy, with this public outcry, has had to commit to treat all ballot mail as first-class mail, to give it top priority. He's invited the 4 postal unions to serve on a national task force with his team and others just around vote by mail. We're going to do that because we think that's what the people of the country deserve. And that doesn't mean we agree with his other policies. And I'll say this: what kind of policy is it to say that we're going to delay these changes just until November, as if mail after November is not as important, or we're just going to do the ballots right and not care about medicine, and not care about financial transactions, and not care about personal correspondence or pension checks and stimulus checks, Social Security checks. So obviously we got some battles ahead, but I think the vote by mail system works. I think we're going to make it work, and I think people are going to have to work to make sure that they get that ballot in early. But there's no question from this White House that their goal has been voter suppression, to undermine people's confidence in vote by mail. And the objective actions of the new PMG unfortunately feed that, because the mail system is not working as well as it has been or it should.
And switching gears a little bit, your union endorsed Senator Bernie Sanders for president a few days before the Iowa caucus back in January. And one of the policies that he's talked about a lot is to transform the post office into a hub of more public goods that includes things like postal banking. What are your thoughts on these proposals? And in a different world, what role should the post office play?
So let me just correct you on one thing. Our National Executive Board endorsed Senator Sanders for president. We didn't have a process by which the whole union could speak. That would happen at a national convention. So we like to be very clear on that. And Senator Sanders has been a tremendous supporter of the Public Postal Service, our union, all unions, and at least U.S. workers in general. So we were proud to have made that endorsement both in this round and in 2016. We completely agree with him about some of the role, and have been raising it ourselves and together with him and others, that the post office can just do so much more as what we call a national treasure that belongs to all of us. Postal banking is a great example. We use the term kind of loosely. There used to be a savings bank in the post office, in the United States Post Office, for about 60 years. But what we would like to see is expanded financial services. And it's a public counter to this predatory payday lending, check cashing industry. So, for instance, and we've said to the post office, look, we're not asking you to do it overnight. Let's try some pilots. Let's try some plans. But we would like to see the post office do paycheck cashing, where it gets put onto a no-fee debit card, so that people don't get ripped off, not just in the cashing of the check, but in every time they use a debit card. We would like to see ATMs in post office, money transfers, remittances, the ability to pay bills online. The Postal Service has been doing financial services for years. It's called money orders, but they haven't brought that up to the electronic digital world. There are many other things the post office could do, from licensing. There are certain state functions, although we certainly want and support state workers doing those functions. There are many areas of the country where someone to actually get to a person, they have to travel 100 miles or they have to travel 60 miles. And here there's a post office right in the neighborhood that they support and they trust. I would like to see, and others, we've raised this, why couldn't many post offices, it depends on the physical layout, but you could have electric car charging stations at so many post offices, which would help the post office also have a more fuel efficient fleet themselves. I think it's the largest. So I think it's the largest fleet, one of the largest fleets in the world. But the idea that somebody could come in, plug in their car, take care of some postal business, run down to the drugstore, the coffee shop, whatever, come back, and off you go. And the Postal Service could become part of that infrastructure, both in rural America and urban. So there are a lot of great things. There's been talk about that, the eyes and ears on road conditions, on pollution, on air quality. The post office, the postal workers already keep an eye on their customers. The wonderful letter carriers, we don't represent them as our union, but letter carriers are known for keeping an eye on their customers. If mail starts piling up, they often know where the son or daughter lives. If it's a elderly person, they have been able to alert authorities when people are sick and need help. So there are all sorts of things that we can do rather than this cutting. You know, when Mr. DeJoy was talking about the $10 billion, well, for one thing, most of that is the pre-funding crap, to be blunt about it, that I was talking about earlier. Without that, most of the operations, without this financial crisis, have actually been in the positive column if it's honest accounting. But the answer isn't to cut and slash. The answer is to expand and grow. And what he's doing, in my view, and I'm not a businessman, I don't want to be a businessman, but what he's doing is he's driving away revenue and business, because if you start slowing down mail, that's what's happening. And we already know that's what's happening. eBay, one of the biggest, you have, millions of small businesses that use that platform. They're already warning people that order on eBay that the post office is having problems and you may want to go elsewhere. How can that be good to help keep this public entity going that relies not on tax dollars, but on revenue? So rather than slashing and cutting, this is the time people want things sooner and quicker, not slower and later. And there's so many things that the post office can be done. If your listeners have heard of this store-to-door concept. So a lot of retailers, rather than using warehousing now, they're using the footprint of their retail space because not as many people are coming in, and it brings orders closer to the customer. That's called store-to-door. There's no one better situated than the public post office to be able to do that. And some of that could be same day. Some of it could be the next day. Internet returns. It shocked me. 30% of internet orders are returned. So there's not just this one-way thing to what they call the last mile. That package then has to go back, and that becomes the first mile, and it has to go through our processing plants. And so there's just so many things that people want to use imagination and to really build postal services like we haven't seen before, or maybe we have seen before, and now we got to do it again, such as postal banking.
So my final question to you is, well, it's a two-pronged question. What is your union doing specifically to protect the post office from this assault in an effort to privatize it? And what can Americans do to help protect the post office?
Well, I guess we're doing the same thing. Our main way is we built, interestingly, and let me get this point in because I raise it everywhere I speak. Our problems of postal privatization did not start with this administration. They're not going to end with this administration, but they have intensified, and they have and this administration is far more aggressive about their goals and their plans to get there. But in 2014, early 2014, we built a grand alliance to save our public postal service. So obviously there were already grave threats that we saw. And that grand alliance has over 80 national organizations. It does include other unions. It includes civil rights, veterans, community, faith-based groups. So that's important because I think the answer is to what we're doing as a union is we're uniting with the people of the country to fight back. So, for example, over 2 million signatures were presented to Congress in June, demanding save the post office to $25 billion in COVID emergency relief. There was one day in July where 28,000 calls were made in one day to the Senate offices around the country. We can't do that by ourselves. And that was on top of calls that have been made more and since. Last Saturday, Move On organized 800 rallies around the country. On Tuesday, the American Postal Workers Union had a day of action. So just speaking up, getting to your local post office, getting some signs out there, save the post office, calling your senators and your House people. It's in the hands of the Senate now, but the House needs to know that they need to stay firm. Folks out there could go to usmailnotforsale.org. That says a lot right there. usmailnotforsale.org for they can sign up to get more information as things unfold in terms of other activities. There will be information there. And just keep this public outcry going. And look, there's a certain spontaneity because this is so close to people. There have been people that we had nothing to do with who got out and protested in front of Louis DeJoy's homes, both in Greensboro, North Carolina, and in Washington, D.C., saying, look, this is wrong, and if you can't do it right, you need to go. So there's just this outpouring, and so we, use whatever imagination, what the post office means to you. There's a way that certainly op-eds, and there's also a way that people can send in videos. I think on the U.S. Mail not for sale, there's a way to give testimonials. And the people in Congress really need to hear, and this Postmaster General needs to continue to hear. So the main way we fight privatization, to be blunt about it, is in the streets, in the communities. There's nothing in our collective bargaining agreement with the post office that says you can't privatize the postal service. But it would take a change in law. They can undermine it along the way, the postal management. It would actually take a change in law to actually privatize the postal service. So I don't think the people of the country are going to allow something like this to be stolen from them. And I think if anybody wants to understand what's going on, just follow the money. And it's whether this money's going to be taken and enrich a few, or whether the money's going to stay in the hands of the people in this in terms of this wonderful service. So again, go to U.S. Mail Not for Sale. You could also go to APWU.org, which is a little more focused on the workers that work there, but there's a lot of good information there as well.